don't.
Yeah, we do.
The Supreme Court. 505 says you cannot. Why? Put anything on unless you get 24 hours.
I'm going to go stand outside then.
And I will ask Officer
What was that? Well, that was a video shot by a student on a cell phone of one of the anti-gun protests across America yesterday, where teachers' unions took their kids out of class onto the street without their parents' permission or consent to protest against gun laws. Well, one student to protest for gun laws and against the NRA, I'm sorry. Well, one student there wrote his own handmade sign in support of gun rights and the Second Amendment, and you saw there, it happened pretty quickly, the school principal threatening that child if he dare spoke up as a dissident against the teachers' union, he would possibly be suspended and even thrown into a police car, showing what these parades of minor students were really all about. Joining us now via Skype to talk about this is our friend Andrew Klavan. He's the host of the Andrew Klavan podcast, which appears Monday to Thursdays daily on thedailywire.com. Andrew, great to see you again. Thanks for joining us.
It's good to see you.
You know what? I think that short video clip, it was a little bit hard to see what was going on, but I think it told the story more clearly than anything. These students were literally being used as cannon fodder by anti-NRA teaching activists, and the one student who thought for himself was threatened with arrest.
Right. Well, I mean, this is the left all over, right? I mean, it's the shouting down of speakers on campuses. It's Twitter shadow banning conservative speakers. It's YouTube demonetizing conservatives. I mean, this is the left because the left has no arguments. And when you have no arguments, all you've got is a narrative. And when you have a narrative, you've got to get people's emotions worked up. I mean, that's what it's all about for the left. That's why they're using children in the first place. It's, oh, these poor children, you know, here they are to tell you what the next generation has to look like. And that is supposed to emotionally sweep us away. And if you are just trying to emotionally sweep people away instead of making an argument, then you can't allow anybody else to have a narrative, right? Yeah. I mean, if you know, I'll have anybody on my show. I'm sure you will debate anybody because you have the arguments, and you can listen to another person's arguments because you have better arguments. But if all you have is emotion, then you've got to do these basically these stunts with children. I think it's a terrible thing to do to the children, too, because one of these days, some of them at least are going to get wise and start to remember why we have guns, why we have freedom, and then they're going to be embarrassed that they were used like this.
Yeah, and these were kids who were roped into it. Again, no notice, warning, or consent from the parents. And the one dissident student was bullied. I'll use that left-wing word. He was bullied. It actually is bullying when the principal threatens you. That's one degree worse in some ways than some of these student activists emerging from the school in Florida. You and I talked about that as some of these very young students who were being revved up and funded by Democrat activists to become anti-gun lobbyists. At least they were, at least on the face of it, choosing to do that. But what we see here are students being taken out of class and press ganged, conscripted into service. What's going on in Florida with some of the students from the mass shooting? It's sort of gross to have teenagers lecture us about policy, but at least they seem to be choosing it. Here, these students are being press ganged against their will. I think that's worse in a way, isn't it?
Well, I think this is the whole thing. The whole thing with the left is it always comes down to force. It always has to come down to force because they can't convince. And I think you know, the only place where I would differ with you is I would say that a lot of these kids have been preconditioned to the opinions that they have. It's a form of child abuse, if you ask me. Even if you're dealing with college students, to take the money from these people and send them to school and not teach them the very basics of their own civilization. If you want to learn about Thomas Jefferson, if you want to learn about James Madison and then reject him, that's one thing, because you have other arguments to bring forward. Then I can meet your arguments with my arguments. But they don't even learn those things. These kids don't even know why there's a Constitution. I mean, I was joking today that when CNN interviews these kids, they ask them these loaded questions like, you know, why is the NRA so evil? That kind of thing. Yeah. Instead of asking them, what I would like to see them ask is, do you know what the Constitution is? Yeah. Do you know when it was written? Do you know who the founding fathers were? Do you know their reasons for giving us, ensuring that we have the right to bear arms? They don't ask them anything to at least prove that they have some knowledge of what they're talking about. And I'm not sure they do. I'm pretty sure they don't.
Yeah. You know, in the province of Ontario in Canada, that's our largest province by population, there's been a recent debate about sex ed curriculum, because the sex ed curriculum was written under the deputy minister who was then convicted of child pornography and pedophilia. And so it's an extreme sex ed. And you may be thinking, what's this got to do with guns? Well, there's an objection to it because of how early it sexualizes kids. For example, it teaches grade school kids that there are 6 genders. Now, Andrew, you're a pretty smart guy, but I bet that even you couldn't name the 6 genders. And the objection...
It's possible I haven't met the other 4.
That's right. You know what? I've never met anyone who knows all 6, by the way, but I guess I should talk to grade schoolers because they're learning it. My point is, the big debate over sex ed is you're displacing parents, you're foisting this on kids without their parents. These are young children of tender years, and you're taking advantage of them. You use the phrase child abuse. You're ideologically forming them. Instead of teaching them, reading, writing, and arithmetic, in the case of Ontario sex ed, they're teaching them 6 genders and that whole ideology. I think that's what's going on here, and they don't give a damn about parents. To heck with parents and what their views are about the Constitution or guns. These teachers' unions and the teachers' administrations are looking at students not as customers to be educated, but as hostages is the wrong word, but people who are trapped and forced to go through an indoctrination for 18 years. I think there's an analogy there. I don't know if I put it very clearly, though.
Well, I think that, when you look back, you look at the way the culture makes fun of conservatives for being in favor of the family. Oh, we want everything to be a 1950s sitcom. We want everything to be father knows best. Conservatives have not been very good at making the argument, which is that the family is the building block of freedom. When you have a family, it is a self-governing unit that teaches children a value system that they can then take out and compare to the value system of the world. The left hates that. The left is not just, they want to get rid of families. Families are not good for the left because families foster freedom. Families foster culture that is individualized and says, here is what we as a family think is good. Here is what we as a family think is right. Now go into the world and compare that to what the world is selling you and see which one, is the right idea. What the left always wants to do is supersede that. You're not smart enough to educate your own children. You're not good enough to educate your own children. You're too selfish. You're too mean. You're too bigoted to educate your own children. So we will do it for you. What on earth are they teaching kids about sex for? Again, the questions I want to know is, can they read? Can they do math? I mean, here in California, we spend more on schools than just about anybody else. We have some of the worst schools in the country because they are teaching this agenda, this left-wing agenda, to supersede the family instead of teaching the kids the skills they need to get along. And it's purposeful. It's purposeful. They always make fun of our love of the family and our defense of the family because they think it makes us square. But really, what they are doing is assaulting the family because the family makes us free.
Yeah. I don't even think the purpose of these rallies was to tell a story in the media. I mean, yes, it was a purpose, the narrative that you talked about, but I think the purpose of these rallies was not so much external, but more internal, to condition, to train students. NRA bad, the teacher I trust says so, my friends say so. It's not even so much about showing the world as it is making young teenagers practice their 2 minutes of hate towards the NRA. I think in that way, it sort of does follow along with a form of psychological child abuse. Last word to you, Andrew.
Well, I think, it's a big piece of candy to give a kid, to suddenly put him on TV, to suddenly listen to his opinions, to have his shouting and his fist, his pounding his fist into his palm to make that important. That's basically what teenagers think the world should be like. I mean, teenagers are natural Nazis. They're naturally authoritarian. They're naturally idealistic, but they're also naturally autocratic because they think they know. They think they know more than they do. It's not that they don't know a lot. It's that they think they know a lot, and they have this kind of idealistic view of the world that they think makes them that they think uplifts them, when really it just makes them foolish. And then to tell them, yes, your idealistic view. And listen, I'm old enough to have seen this before. I saw it in the 60s when the kids came out and took over buildings, and nobody stood up to them, and nobody said, you guys don't know enough to be destroying Western civilization like this. Nobody said it. that's what's happening now because they think they're going to control the kids, but ultimately the kids transform the culture into something as childish and as autocratic as they are.
Yeah, and then you get a prime minister like Trudeau. Well, I said you'd get the last word, but I always feel like I have to get a little PS in. You made me think of a quote. I think it was Mark Twain who said, "I left home at 16. When I came back at 21, I couldn't believe how much my dad had learned." I think that's Mark Twain. I'll have to check it out. I think that's exactly what's going on here. Andrew, it's great to talk with you. Thanks for making the time with us. And folks, if you haven't listened, may I recommend that you go to the Daily Wire and listen to Andrew Klavan's daily podcast there. It's a real treat. Thanks so much for being with us, Andrew. That's an excerpt from my daily TV show, The Ezra Levant Show. Normally it's behind a paywall, but I thought you'd like this video, so we put it on YouTube. If you want to subscribe to watch The Daily Show every day, including always 2 interviews a day, and I read my hate mail, just click on this screen and become a premium member.